Hello and good evening again. It's Wednesday and the program is Ideas Exchange. It's something that gives us the opportunity to look at and the input we can make, and of course to take lessons and how best we can forge ahead as one people. Today, the 2022 budget statement was presented to Parliament. There were a lot of expectations, but at the end of the day, we have an idea about what government intends to do for next year. We know government says it's a budget of hope, what it describes as a Jenkwa budget. Government admits in the budget that things are tough, and government hopes to raise revenue because many people who have been watching our economy, following our financial transactions, either locally or outside the country by way of monies we are borrowing, are saying that we seem to have borrowed so much. And government has two options: to go to IMF to increase revenue generation, or to look at other options, which will be cut down on expenditure. So the finance minister today said they are going to look at revenue mobilization. They are expecting about 44% increase in tax mobilization compared to what happened this year. And government, according to the budget statement, is looking at raising the figure from 70 billion thereabout to 100 billion cedis. The minority thinks it's an over-ambitious projection. Our government believes it will get there. And while we are looking at the 2022 budget, and I'll share some of the graphics with you, we'll be doing a lot of graphics and responses from members of parliament and other people we shall be speaking to on this program, Ideas Exchange. You would see that government is looking at a number of areas. One, which is gone viral, is what they call Momo transactions or e-transactions. So government is going to tax an aspect of your transaction if you have to do any form of movement of money from one bank to the other, or what simply government will describe as Momo transaction. Apart from that, government is also looking at property rate mobilization, where the Ghana Revenue Authority will be liaising with the MMDAs, that's the Metropolitan, Municipal and District Assemblies, to look at how best they can ensure efficiency, and there'll be some sharing portfolio where GRA will take a certain percentage of that. Again, government is looking at 2-year tax relief for textile manufacturers, which is supposed to be extended. Government is looking at the flat rate VAT ratio, which will remain but be limited to retailers with annual turnover of about $500,000. Government is thinking of scrapping the benchmark value on selected imports. I'll be looking at some of these items in the course of this program. And then less than 10% of Ghana's 30.8 million population are paying tax. And if you look at that graph, you find it very exciting when, for example, the finance minister says only Greater Accra is taking about 90% plus of all the revenue or in form of tax that government is raising. And Kumasi, Eastern region, and some part of Western region, Takrady to be specific, is raising barely around 3%. And the remaining 6-point-something% is for the rest of the country. That's quite exciting. Tonight, my guest is a young man. He's got a white beard, but he's a very young man. He's a banker with over 15 years experience in customer experience, sales and marketing, IT, banking operations, financial inclusion, remittance, fund management, investment, bank assurance. As we speak, he's an international consultant. He just came out to Ghana recently from Sierra Leone. He's a trainer, a coach, and currently the Vice President, Sales and Marketing, InvestCorp Asset Management. He is Harrison Ahogba. Harrison, how are you?
I'm fine, Eric.
And happy to see you again.
Thank you so much.
It's been a while. Now, InvestCorp Asset Management, what do you do?
So thank you for the opportunity, and we thank our viewers for tuning in to listen. It's a very educational platform, so we're looking to have an engagement and a feedback, like you said. So InvestCorp Asset Management, we are a company established in 2013. We are into asset management, like the name sounds. So asset management means we do investments. So we have tailor-made short, medium, and long-term investment, regulated by Security and Exchange Commission. We are also regulated by the National Pensions Regulatory Authority. So that means everything pensions in terms of tier 3, we are able to do that for you. When you want to plan for your future, you want to drive that Mercedes-Benz that we are talking about, you want to live in that expensive, beautiful house in the future, we are the right people we should be talking to.
It's exciting. I'm sure one of these days we'll be looking at this aspect of our lives where we talk about investment, we talk about security for your own future.
Definitely.
Many of us don't seem to understand because we assume that what we have is too little to make savings.
Good.
And even institutions which are supposed to be guaranteeing that are shortchanging us by paying less what SNIT, for example, is demanding. And you may not know because you don't have an interest. It's an interesting area. I'll be going there.
That's fine.
Harrison, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much for
this
time.
conversation is not to look into detail about the 2022 budget. This conversation is trying to look at what this budget means for you on the surface and what you need to do to adjust yourself. If you are running business, if you are an individual, if you are not working, for example, what does it mean to you going forward? Because we are told that Momo transactions, for example, as soon as Parliament approves the budget, it takes effect. And in the same way, I believe that if you are a property owner, some of these staff engaged by GRA, maybe NAPCO staff, will be knocking at your door to ask you to show proof of payment of property rate. There's more that we'll be talking about this morning, but I want us to look at the budget overview, the summary as put together by the Finance Ministry. And if you go to that particular, you realize that it's called Ajinkwa Budget 2022 Budget Brief. The Finance Minister, for example, talks about priority should be given to ongoing capital projects and projects with outstanding balances as a first charge on the capital budget. New capital projects should be informed by the sector medium-term level, and he moves on to talk about ensuring restoration and sustainability of macroeconomic stability with a focus on fiscal and debt sustainability. Priority should be given to ongoing capital. So we moved on past that. You go to next. We will ensure the restoration and sustainability of macroeconomic stability. It talks about non-oil, non-tax revenues from MDAs that generate internally generated funds, that's IGFs, which is supposed to go up to 8.41 billion in 2022 and increase to about 14.8% thereafter. And then we'll move on to the next slide, and you know that it's talking about Government of Ghana recognizing the need to be at the forefront to promote the building blocks for an inclusive and sustainable recovery post-COVID-19. Now, as we have the conversation, I'm sure the producers will be sharing some of these slides so that they can read along and then listen to you. What is your first take when we have to talk about this 2022 budget?
So I'm very proud to the budget being read. You know, there were a lot of speculations, especially in the industry. Those of us who handle money and we deal with people. The whole idea is what are the expectations of the impact the budget is going to have, where you are going, and how you will get there. So the budget simply is just a platform where the government or anybody will say that I am here now, I'll be there tomorrow, and this is how I want to do it. Now, the interesting thing for me, but from where we sit, is it's a very slippery rope. Government is torn between, as it were, recovering from the COVID issues globally, and then trying to find itself to, as it were, achieve the promises that it made earlier in the beginning of the year. I mean, at the previous budgets that were read, there were some promises that were made. Funds are not coming. In your intro, you mentioned about the high debts and its impact on the economy. In fact, there have been some shocks in the Eurobond market of international investors being careful whether the government will be able to pay interest when they are due on their debt. And also the budget, some parts look promising, like you mentioned, but some other parts also look very scary because just to jump the ship, but you know, when you spoke about the Momo tax, for instance, it was very concerning because just recently we had a vice president in a very ambitious drive to digitize most of the platforms and activities of the nation. So the question is there a connect between this and the financial inclusion drive that we want to push across? So the cash-like discussion is very fresh in our mind. So now if you are going to go down to task those people who you are pushing to be in the industry. So basically we have three types of people in the finance sector. We have the banked, maybe you and I. Then we have the unbanked, and then we have the underbanked. Even to the extent that we, those who call ourselves the banked, we are not even using and benefiting from the full value chain of the banking services or the financial services sector, as the case may be. So let's see how the discussion goes. Like you said, it's an early day discussion. Maybe they'll give us more insights based on the consultations that will be done. Again, one point of interest for me was the discuss before now, the benchmark, the reduction that you spoke about. You hear Guta on one side fighting strongly, and the Association of Ghana Industry, AG, also fighting strongly. So the question is, where are we going to find a middle ground to fight this cause? The truth, admittedly, the finance minister said the government needs money. How the money would come to finance the promised project, the flagship project, is what we are going to look at in a few months.
Okay, so I like the summary and the two sides of the coin. Good. The positives, which if they materialize, we'll see some improvement in our economy, and the challenge, i.e. the average Ghanaian who is most likely to suffer. Now, the suffering is tied to jobs. Jobs would then be linked to revenues in terms of how much you are paid. And then it will also translate into purchasing power. Because the other side of this conversation is about businesses which may now be struggling because of the removal of the benchmark values. And they have already cautioned that they are going to translate that into the new cost of the commodity. So obviously prices will go up. And then you're also looking at industry, which would have to also speak to the new policies that are coming and how raw materials they are bringing in can actually help them to break even.
That's it.
We'll share some Kpmg statistics, which was on pre-2022 budget, which also looks at the impact on the previous policies, i.e. the 2020-2021 budget, on the supposed benefactors. Now, let's start with the jobs. Government talks about jobs. If you look at the 2021 budget, government talks about You Start initiative. It says that it is going to create 1 million jobs for the youth in 2022. And then they're supposed to increase year by year, and then the seed capital of 1 billion cedis for the project will also be seen to be increasing year by year. When government talks about Momo tax, the breakdown government says will, first of all, help them to raise revenue to increase jobs, raise revenue to handle infrastructure gaps, and at the same time address the other related issues that are the issues on the table we want to talk about today. Is this a mirage? Is it achievable or overambitious?
Well, each of the narratives you gave in terms of the adjective will fit in one point or the other. So we are talking of the mobile money agents. We have a lot of them, maybe in millions in the country. Now they have quite a stable job because that's what they wake up to every day and they benefit from. So now with this tax coming, my fear is that the drive for financial inclusion might be hampered, because typical of you, if you are going to send 1,000 cedis now, what it means now, what you have been told is that you are going to pay a tax of 1 cedi, 17 cedi 50 pesos, for instance. So on the other end, if you add the two, you are looking at 27 Ghana cedis. If it is not a good incentive for you, you won't do it. What would be the implication? I won't take my money to the mobile money agent. Once I don't take my money to the agent, he wouldn't have a work to do. So you are rather instead of creating an avenue for him to contribute his quota. On the reverse, if the tax was not available, you know, at least for the figures we have had, about 500 billion Ghana cedis of mobile money transaction as at now. Why? It's very convenient, it is easy to use, and then it is to the very large extent very safe for people to transact business, so that even those who are unbanked in the villages are benefiting from it. So if you are not careful in its implementation, we'll rather push people out of business instead of creating a job. Now, sorry, when you spoke about the new initiative, so the question is, you know, we've had some of these from NYEP, we have the Ghana Enterprise, like a lot of interventions.
The youth enterprise,
all of them are there. So the question is,
lately, the NAPCO, for example.
Fine. So the question is that, are we going to add on to it? What is going to be different in terms of funding and giving them money for startup? We know, in fact, the research is very clear that at least about 70% of startup fail even in the first 5 years. What support system are they going to have in place? Why are we now going to implement a new thing when we can mop up what we have done in the past to empower the people? So we are now going to start a new initiative, give them the money. You and I know that usually when monies are coming from government, our attitude towards it is like it's free money. So unless, of course, we are going to involve other stakeholders like the banks or some institutions, to be very difficult to see how this is going to impact positively. Now,
there's one interesting thing that has come across, either as a surprise, even though we knew it, but we never had an idea about the figures.
Yeah.
The finance minister says, for example, that only about 10% of Ghanaians are supporting this economy by way of direct taxes.
Yeah.
Again, if you also want to look at the breakdown in terms of regions and how much revenue government is raising, government talks about Greater Accra, which is doing about 90% of revenues they are able to generate in terms of taxes. Is it not a reason why government may want to be a bit more careful in looking at the new tax policy and so want to spread it to bring everybody on board? So we have Momo.
Yes, so you are right. You are very right. So I was saying earlier on another platform that when you look at Greater Accra, the misconception is very limited. But the good news for us is that we have extended Greater Accra to cover some parts of some regions. So specifically Kaswa, for instance, is more of Greater Accra than it is in the central region. So when you loop them in, then it can account for the high numbers we are looking at. But again, in sharing the pipe equally, you are right. So that the government will focus on saying that now that we have this, even from the population census that we had lately, you could see that there are a lot of concentration of businesses here. Even the demographics for the relationship between men, women, job movement, and also it would have been ideal to spread the options of development to some areas. So like you rightly said, some of the other regions don't have anything they are contributing at all. So the question is, what are you going to do about them? Because a large percentage of those we are going to tax for the Momo transactions are in Greater Accra region. So what happens to those people in the other side that the development is not getting to? So it's an interesting, like I said, it's a very slippery discussion we are having, but I'm minded by the hope aspect of the budget that says that we're looking forward to achieving X at this time. That the target as it is very ambitious. Very, very ambitious.
Okay. We will try to also speak to the Director of Operations of Dalex Finance, Joe Jackson, because before the budget presentation, he tweeted that Ghana is simply broke. And looking at the way forward, taxation will be a key factor. And having listened to the minister, I want to look at what is in there and whether it is actually going to address the problems we have. We spoke to some members of parliament.
Okay.
And both the majority and minority side gave their initial responses to the presentation. We have Kpmg who spoke. We have Alexander Apenyomakin who also spoke. And then Isaac Adongo also commented on an aspect referring to the Momo tax, for example. Kojo Ponkroma tried to respond. I want us to listen to Kpmg briefly. Here he talks about where Ghana was and what he thinks are serious issues that the minister deliberately tried to ignore, which is not going to send strong signals to the investment community about our readiness to tackle the problems we have created by overborrowing and overspending in 2020. Let's listen to Kpmg.
Budget has been presented at a time when the Ghanaian economy is in deep crisis and is indeed in complete shambles. The key issues affecting the economy in the run-up to the presentation of this budget includes the following. Number one, huge and unsustainable public debt leading to the loss of access to the international financial market, deteriorating credit ratings, and a complete loss of confidence in the Ghanaian economy. Number two, unprecedented budget deficit of 15.6% and primary deficit of 8.8% in the year 2020, which has led to more borrowings. Number three, severe hardships and extreme high cost of living caused by the imposition of a raft of taxes. Number four, rapid depreciation of the Ghanaian currency. Number 5, ever-increasing fuel prices and general food inflation. Number 7, massive unemployment. Number 8, large arrears accumulation and non-payment of contractors' owings. And above all, poor quality of government expenditure and the misuse of our scarce resources on ostentation and creature comfort of government officials.
So we have the former Deputy Finance Minister Kpmg Tvxyz, who is also the ranking on the Finance Committee of Parliament. He talks about issues you and I know are of concern, issues that are of concern to all of us. But the Deputy Majority Leader believes that there is hope, and he tries to explain why you should not be worried. I want us to listen to him, and then we'll find out whether you are worried or we are on the right path.
The interventions made and the promises for the future. First, for the records, the Honorable Finance Minister, through his presentation, told Ghanaians that 38,000 nurses were employed within the period under review. 36.8 million tax exemptions to frontline health workers. And for emphasis, no public sector worker was laid off. Other jurisdictions are experiencing situations where public sector workers are being laid off. Delay in salaries. But in Ghana, no single public sector worker was laid off as a result of the COVID. No salary delays. Government made sure that in spite of the difficulties, all public sector workers were paid and on time. All allowances, all salaries due them per the minister's submission before the House have been paid and duly paid. Now, to the informal sector, they were hard hit, and the minister, per the records available, through first the coronavirus alleviation program business support scheme, 523 million loans were given to individuals and entities in the informal sector. So in all, 302,001 entities benefited from this 523 million soft loans to support their business.
So the debate on this budget has not actually started. I believe that next week, when Parliament begin to sit on Tuesday, I guess, they would break things down for us, and all of us will join that conversation. But today, if you own a business, if you're an average Ghanaian worker, are you convinced either by what Tvxyz said or what Alexander Afenyumaken is saying is enough to let you know how things will be like in future? Now, you listen to both. We have more tapes to play. How does it come across, or how should this come across to the average person who must be positioning himself into next year?
So, like, what we do as investment institution is to look for opportunities where we tell people that try and put some money aside for the future. And the future, unfortunately, is today. So, per these discussions that have happened, I can assure you there will be a lot of discomfort, because already we are all hard pressed with various issues. You go to the market and people would hardly have enough to eat or to even think of putting some aside. So now that we have all these taxes coming in, like I said earlier, those who are supposed to benefit are going to be hurt more. You rightly mentioned that the finance minister mentioned that it's only about 2.3 million people who are paying tax. So it means we have about 27 million people. If you use the
current population rate, that's about 30.8 million.
So the 27 million, which are largely in the informal sector, are not paying. You and I will be paying through our pay-as-you-earn tax. So we are already burdened. So for you to be able to squeeze someone, even as an individual now, is going to be very difficult. Not even talk of businesses who are also grappling with the COVID and its related issues. So earlier on, we had some discussion from Guta mentioning that businesses did not really benefit from the impact of the benchmark when it was even reduced to 50%. The reason is just when 2019 they were about to benefit, what happened was the increase in freight charges due to the COVID and limited production from the other countries. So it really affected what they were going to benefit from. So our argument that we did not really feel the impact of that was justified to some extent. But now that it has been taken off, like we said, all those things will add up to the prices that are going to be on the market. So if I'm saying is that in the next couple of weeks, after all the consultation that we had will be going on, if you are not careful, what would happen is that you and I at the retail level, we are going to feel the hunch of having to pay more for your toilet roll, for your oil, for the other things. The fear is that the real impact of what we have sought to do in the last budget that was read was to allow local industries to build up capacity to be producing what we were importing. As to whether we have really empowered them in terms of capacity, in terms of other resources to be able to do that is also another issue. So once we are not producing locally to compete favorably with what was coming externally, it will be very difficult for us to benefit.
Now, I am an ordinary Ghanaian who depends on my employer to put food on my table if I am lucky enough to stay in that business.
Good.
There are businesses which need to break even so that they can add more or at least sustain the work of employees they have. What we see is some level of difficulty if indeed the expected impact of the policies we put in place in 2021, especially because 2021 was a post-COVID budget.
Yeah.
And in there were a number of initiatives that government took. Yeah. But they hardly improved the space some of these industries had to get to operate than supporting them. Yeah. Let me give you examples of what I had found out. For example, the taxes that were introduced in 2021, for example. Now, some of these taxes, as you may know, were the, I'll get it right now, these were the Interest Waiver Act, Penalty and Interest Waiver Act, COVID-19 Health Recovery Levy Act, Financial Sector Recovery Levy Act, Energy Sector Levy, which was an amendment of Act 2, 2021, and then we have the Income Tax Amendment Act, and then it goes on and on. Now, many of these were rather taken than given space to these businesses to operate. Now, if that is going to be the same picture we are seeing next year, what does it mean to me? And what alternatives are there for either businesses or individuals who are dependent on themselves and what they can do for survival?
So then they will call for a lot of innovative ways of living. Already we say that in Ghana, all of us are managers. Now, businesses have to find innovative ways to keep afloat, where we are looking at how you can cut down costs. Because if you are not making enough, you should not be letting a lot go out. So how do you stay afloat? So you have to look at your business operations and think of optimizing it to the fullest. Unfortunately, in this aspect of digitization today, there are now some taxes that's going to affect you, but you don't have any option. So you look at your business model, think of a way to innovatively outsmart the system positively so that you can increase productivity, but you should be able to reduce your operational cost. I don't know how you're going to look at it, but if you talk to the right people, you look whether you have to cut down electricity, your transportation costs, or other costs. But unfortunately, most businesses are going to lay people off. Because once they are not making enough and they are not produced to meet what the market is expecting from, people are not really spending. You mentioned the purchasing power. Yes, the inflation looks good on paper, but it's not reflecting in the pocket. So at the end of the day, if you're a business, you're not making much, what will you do? You have to lay the people off. And
now, it's sad to hear this because some would say it's a sign of pessimism that is not good for anybody hoping to see something better for our country, and that does not reflect the assurance the finance minister gave us in that budget presentation. Now, for those of you who have just joined us, the program is Ideas Exchange on Tvxyz, and we are being supported by X Natural Mineral Water. And of course, if you also want to join this conversation by way of supporting us, either by advert or being any of the sponsors, just call the numbers we'll be sharing on the screen or speak to me of this program, I'll direct you to our marketing team to have a conversation with you on the way forward. Now, I have what when I was digging information, I saw the Kpmg 2022 pre-budget survey report. Now, in this pre-budget survey report, it talks about a number of things that will really excite you. I'll share some on the screen shortly. I was looking for the impact of some of the initiatives government has put in place on businesses as they grew for the year 2020. And when it pops up on the screen, I'll share with you. For example, it talks about impact of physical measures introduced in 2020 on the Energy and Natural Resource Center. It talks about impact of this on government, health, and industry. It talks about impact of this on consumer and industrial markets. And if you see what I'll share on the screen, you realize that they are talking about extension of 2% special import levy. They talk about waiver of penalties on outstanding debt settled by the 30th of June. It talks about deduction of contributions and donations towards COVID-19. And it talks about, decrease in communication, waiver of penalties, and so on. Now, what we are seeing on the screen is actually the benchmark value. We'll go there later, but for my producers, you see that I've done some graphics which come in the name of Kpmg, and they show some bar graphs and so on. Once it's ready, yes, so you see what I was talking about. The impact of fiscal measures introduced in 2020 on consumer and industrial markets. Now, if you look at it, you realize that we have 33% for the sea blue, 11% for the color in maybe violet, the deep blue, 33%, and then 11% and 11% green and opaque. Now, the figures, if you go down the graph, you see that the blue is 1, 2, the pink, 3 is deep blue, 4 is green, and 5, let me call it gray. Now, it says first is least impact, and 5 is highest impact. So, the color sea blue is number 1 at the bottom of the graph. And that is less impact, least impact, and the 5 is the highest impact. Now, if you go back to the data, you realize that extension of 2% special import levy, the impact on industry, for example, is about 11%. And if you look at the one which came with the highest figure, that's 22%, that is decrease in communication services tax. So at the end of the day, the impact on industry, or maybe those in the consumer section, is not huge. And government is suggesting that there is some semblance of that going forward in the 2022 budget. And the private sector may not benefit that much.
So remember I mentioned to you earlier that there's one thing setting these targets and objectives, but at the end of the day, it is the enforcement that should work. So yes, there are a lot of tax incentives given to a lot of people. In fact, when you look at the tax waivers for some of the companies that are, especially under the one district, one factory and all, you would have thought that by this time the impact would have been awesome. And I just give you an example of one of the things that I have worked on. So you look at an institution like the Kpmg juice factory, where they have a beautiful fruit juice in a park, very nice. But I challenge you to let us know how many of these that we are going to find in the shops. So what it means is that we are not doing much when it comes to walking the talk. So at the end of the day, if these are not being felt, the reality check is that the people who are the ordinary Ghanaian, like we always say, are going to be the ones to suffer. How do we translate this policy statement to affect the life of the people that we want to?
Are we shooting ourselves in the foot? And for those of you who are joining us, this Ideas Exchange, we bring this to you on Wednesdays between 8 and 9 p.m. I think in the next 10 minutes, I'll open the phone lines and take just 4 calls. And I want your views on what you see into the future, or what you recommend you and I should be doing to brace ourselves for any difficulty that we may anticipate going forward. Now, I was asking if we are shooting ourselves in the foot. And I'll share some of the commodities affected by the waiver or the removal of the benchmark value policy. And you see the likely effect on the price of commodities on the market. I'm asking this question on the back of the Kpmg juice factory reference you made. Now, if a lot of these imports may come with a higher cost because traders still want to bring them in,
good.
You and I know the impact.
Sure.
Now, if a lot of traders may not be able to bring them in because I don't have the purchasing power, and therefore bringing them in will mean that they will remain on the shelves, it means that we must be able to produce as many of those products internally to meet consumer demand, or we are not getting anywhere.
So that's what I said, that now, to that extent, how are we translating the issue of capacity and resources for such companies? So it's true you have waived the tax for the importation, but a guy down here who is producing that juice or who is producing that biscuit or whatever does not have that capacity in terms of material acquisition, in terms of knowledge transfer, the technological know-how to expand. You get it? So it becomes very difficult for the average Ghanaian to benefit from whatever benefits that would have inured to him or her. So it means that the reality check as an individual is to squeeze yourself. You have to be very innovative, adjust a lot of your lifestyle options to see how you can make ends. Because
now, I sell banana or ripe plantain, which is roasted by the street. I sell coconut. I'm a private person who has I have my own garage. And so I expect that people will bring or drive in and I'll fix their problems and make money. If many of these garages I speak to are saying that they are not able to pay, they want to pay in installment. You go to Abosokai, nobody is buying. Now, businesses are saying we can't employ you because we are struggling, and staff feel threatened because tomorrow they may announce that 4 more have to go home. Now, that is likely to be on a higher scale in 2022 if things don't balance fast.
Unfortunately, it's going to be the new normal.
If that will happen, what do you think the average Ghanaian must do to position him or herself for any unexpected thing that may happen?
Well, I wouldn't call it unexpected. It has become the new normal. In fact, we've been adjusting and managing for a while now, but it's going to be very tougher. So, for instance, when you're thinking of coming to work, maybe you'd have to partner with me to see if I can give you a lift or we can share the cost. So there are innovative ways we have to work around things. So if you're going to buy some basic things for the household, you and I should put our money together to do some bulk purchasing so that I can get the things at a cheaper rate. That's at the individual level. So on the corporate or SME level, SMI, I'm thinking that there will be a lot of collaborations because at the end of the day, you are producing your plantain as a roasted plantain. If I am a dispatch rider regulated properly, I should be able to help in conveying that plantain to the next person at a fee. But if I'm waiting for you to move your car from office to come, because of traffic and the cost, you might not even come. Now, even if you send me Momo, you are supposed to pay a certain fee. You get it? So business would have to learn to collaborate. Individuals and households have to learn to adjust. I don't know how, but I think that doing things together, the synergies of strength would be able to afford you an opportunity to cut down some lifestyle.
Do you see that if things remain as it is, because 2020, from even Kpmg's assessment, is not telling us that some of the interventions helped us, government may end up being the sole engine for job creation rather than looking at the private sector because of technology and the space which is already squeezed.
So ultimately, we all know the government is the largest spender. So if the government is already struggling to spend, you know, we heard the finance minister say some time ago that, in fact, the payroll in terms of the public sector is very full. So people should now think of being entrepreneurial. I'm sure that's the reason why they brought the new initiative to support all the interventions under the NYEP and all. So to the extent that we are looking at that narrative, it means that if the success story, in this case, the picture painted by Kpmg, if it was good, I'm sure you would have expected government to take credit for it. But guided by what we are going through globally, COVID is also, as it were, we are still recovering. But I'm sure there are other ways that we could have done this, not necessarily taxing the poor as the case now. Because for me, financial inclusion has brought a lot of liberty and freedom to our economy. Everybody now has one form of relationship in enjoying financial inclusion. So now, are we asking ourselves for the people to stay back? How would they leverage on that and how would they do business? And what incentive are you going to give them if you are going to charge them more for what we are proposing as the gateway for us to be financially free?
Okay, so my guest this evening is Harrison Ahogba. He's the Vice President and Sales, in charge of Sales and Marketing, Invest Corp, which is one of the agencies which is doing much in terms of managing finances, people's pensions here and there. I think before we wrap up this program, I'll ask him to share a bit more with us as we speak to him. I want you to think about this. In 2020, many people expected that government will look at how to cushion workers in particular, and government says nobody was laid off. Today, when the finance minister was presenting the 2022 budget, finance minister appeared to be commending labor unions for understanding that the 4% was good enough to help government to at least adjust in 2021. 2022, we know the agreement has already been struck that salaries will go up by 5%. What does it mean to you with all these things coming up in 2022? Again, if you are a trader, you are an importer, as Guta or any of those in that sector are complaining. How does it come to you if you were dependent on some of the imports which have been affected by the scrapping of the benchmark value? I want to share with you some of the items affected. In fact, this special discount is affecting sugar. And you know, Commander Sugar Factory, we have deliberately allowed it to be where it is. It has virtually collapsed. And it will take so much money to bring it back. And we import so much sugar on daily basis. About 60% of Ghanaians eat sugar-related food. So sugar, pasta, spaghetti, noodles, macaroni, palm oil, crude and refined oils, which means even the cars that you use would suffer some form of increment. Aluminium finished products, roofing sheets, toilet paper, facial tissue, and towel, chocolate, Portland cement, and clinker, and even mosquito coil. So day-to-day consumables are largely affected. That's not all. You have other items like vehicles, ceramic tiles, maybe for those at the middle upper income level who be expecting this in their rooms, aluminium products, cartons, boxes of paper, fruit juice, tomato paste, ketchup, paperboard cases, and of corrugated paper, machete, water, iron steel bars, and so on and so forth. Now, look at these products. And every average home in Ghana depends on this.
Definitely.
Benchmark, Guta says don't remove it. Obviously, government has no breathing space. So government has to waive it to save some money.
Good.
How will this play out? More demonstrations by workers, more hardship, layoffs, businesses folding up under COVID. Because I've listened to people who say government appears not to be sensitive enough because government is wasting money on policies or programs that appear to be freebies or populist, and then the average Ghanaian is suffering at the tail end.
Well, so sometimes, to a very, like, most of the time, some of these policies that we talk about, I've always said it's like just going for somebody's a widow. You might have experienced life with a husband before, now he's a widow. So when you are going in as a second husband, you don't need to promise a lot because you don't know what is in the kitchen. Now, this government came in with a lot of expectation. I hope, like you rightly said, everybody was looking forward to a lot of things. As to whether it's been done, it's another discussion altogether. Up until the COVID, we saw the GDP around 7% and all. Now, we are in less than 2%. The impact we can all see. I'm suspecting that, like you rightly said earlier, that the issues of debts that we took was supposed to be used for some things. Again, the justification is that because of COVID, most of our dreams could not come true as a nation. Now, the freebies you spoke about, they are a stark reality, especially the free SHS and other initiatives that people could afford. But once you take that freebies, you are putting a lot of pressure on yourself because the freebies you're giving, they are not productive. The free SHS students, they are not going to be in productive sectors now until a certain time. So what are you going to use to complement that you have taken? So if you said, I shouldn't pay my fees, that means you are going to do something. Now, the tax is also not enough to accommodate. There's no breathing space, like you rightly said. The challenge now is we are going to have to buy the bullet more, unfortunately.
Okay, so now, is it that we don't learn lessons. And at this stage, I believe that the producers will share some numbers on the screen, and I'll take a few calls so that we can also hear your views. I'll take only 4 for now. The program ends at 9 o'clock. Now, we had free water, free electricity. At the time when government was adjusting itself, and so we had to pay some taxes, which were announced in the 2021 budget, for example. Information Minister Kojo Oponkroma, I heard, was saying that, look, you must understand that we cushioned you at a certain time, and we have to find a way to make sure you pay back. Now, government says road toll, no more. I want to share with you what Chamber of Petroleum Consumers has said just recently. I'm told there's somebody on the line. Good evening. Good evening, sir. Unfortunately, the line has dropped. So, yes, so please, if you call, just reduce the volume on your TV set and then make your contribution very brief. There's somebody else on the line. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Freedom.
Yeah, please, may I know where you called from and make your submission very brief?
Yeah, I'm calling from
Where?
Minini.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Yeah. What I want to say is that it is what we voted for. It's what we are getting now. We vote for the change, and the change comes. And so you have to enter the change to see more taxes will come than this. And we are realizing that this government is very, very tricky. The government knew every trick to reduce taxes from here, add another one to another one.
Okay, so I presume that you have made your point. Thank you very much.
Yeah. This government will ever experience it.
All right, thank you. I'm told we have another person on the line. Your name and where you called us from, sir?
Pocho, Mohammed Azim Nzima.
Yo, Pocho Nzima, Azim for 1 year, Michobia.
Bia no way you are.
Yo, Pocho Bonito Mahena, na Yemfa, Obisna line.
You, Medase. Ever there, Bibia, in share and entry, honorable of Yakunoko.
Yo.
Yes, and the budget in a finance minister, I developed to the parliament order. I remember 2 moon there. This government on by there of a little boy. You will see the employer, you mount see a wound and Yaman for your Ghana. Did the CCS cover and the CCS, the go to your phone, or the baby move that. Not yet, I get a full of this year. I can tell you, your own campaign or pedagogy moves this year.
Yo, Pocho,
the friend. Yo, on jet, the master of budget, you know, only on task and MPs know what parliament for John. Mr. Momo did the mom and Marion Fund.
Pocho, Yan Tilmam. Now, somebody else was on the line. Good evening. Okay, so I want to share with you what. Okay, good evening. I know you are on the line. You can respond. Good evening again.
Hello. Yes, good evening.
Yeah, may I know where you called us from, sir?
Yes, my name is Mashud. I'm calling from Wale Wale.
Wale Wale, okay. Make it brief, sir.
Okay, so I just want to say a very big thank you for the opportunity given me. Ghanaians should be awake now because the mantra of the MP recently is that they should break the eight, and this agenda is with Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. This hardship of the taxes they are putting on us, we need to ask ourselves who is the head of the economic minority. And if they are saying that they want to break the eight with him, we should ask ourselves, if he becomes the president of the republic, what then is it going to do to us? So he is an insensitive person who doesn't care about the ordinary Ghanaian. He is running away from the economy because his own words are now hunting him, and he wants to come and break the eight and slaughter. So let's be mindful and ensure that 2024 we bring back His Excellency to continue to do.
Okay. Thank you. You've made your point. I think I'll take the last call. Unfortunately, I reduced it to 4 on such days. Good evening. Yeah, good evening. Make it brief, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening,
Hello.
sir.
Yeah, evening.
Yeah, make it brief and speak fast, sir.
You said?
Okay, I think my
Hello.
producers will handle you, and then when you are set, I'll speak to you again. Let me take advantage to read with you the statement by the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers. It's about road tolls. It says, it is a verifiable fact that for every liter of fuel purchased, a levy of 48 pesos is paid for the construction and maintenance of roads, which cumulatively over the years has yielded in excess 10 billion cedis. Considering the rate of the road fund levy of 48 pesos per liter of fuel sold, what it means is that 2020 alone, the government made a direct total collection of the figure you see there, about 3 billion plus times 0.48, which is amounting to the figure there now. This is just a percentage of the tax component on fuel, which is going into the road fund.
Good.
Now, the road toll, obviously, is the monies we collect at the various toll booths across the country, which is also part of the fund that is generated. They're supposed to be used for maintenance and other aspects of defects on our road. Just as we spoke about freebies that come back to hunters, was it a populist decision by government to decide that at a stage when we are talking about year of roads and we have many of our roads getting to
deplorable states,
or deplorable states, you are removing road tolls when you need money to address people's concerns?
So again, it fits into what we were discussing, that I don't know whether it was I want to assume a lot of thinking went into this, but from where I sit, another angle of discussion is that yes, X amount of money is collected, but there's so much wastage in terms of the efficiency of the
so
management.
if there's wastage, for example, I don't expect my finance minister to come and tell me that because of pollution around the toll booth, they want to remove it and it will end. It doesn't make sense to me, because the cars will remain on the road. The fumes that come from the exhaust pipes are still around. And so as long as cars drive around Accra, whether there's toll booth or not, once they are overage cars, we are bringing them in. It doesn't support that flimsy excuse that, oh, we are removing the road tolls or we are dismantling the road tolls because we want to protect the environment. People sell around those areas. They make the place. It doesn't. I thought it doesn't make sense.
Now again, it will still come to bite us, because the next question is that where these funds that we were collecting hitherto, where are we now going to tax them from? Where I suspect it's gone to the Momo tax. That's simply put. So at the end of the day, the extension is that in the past, you and I would have been driving to pay our toll because we were car owners or we're doing it for commercial purposes. But as it is now, you are in the village, you are a farmer, you are not going to the farm. You are not going to drive, you don't have a car. But because of the Momo transaction, you'll be invariably paying the toll that I would have been paying using the Tamamuto.
Well, we'll be looking at the next 5 minutes or 7 minutes, wrapping up on this conversation. Some members of parliament try to explain why they are against or for this budget. In one of them, Isaac Adongo and Kojo Oponkroma speak. Let's hear them.
Somebody, you are transferring to your Momo wallet, you are paying out to your grandmother in the village, but Omia is waiting to take his share before you spend that money. And yet you are paying taxes on that income. So you are paying double taxes because your income is taxed. The money that they now give to you as your net salary is also taxed if you spend the money by any electronic means. So what it definitely means is that we have reversed the electronic platform that we are creating by over 25 years. I will always go to the bank and withdraw my money, so I don't pay that money. It is the same way you are likely not to be using your platforms to spend your money, but will be queuing at the bank because you want to avoid double taxation of the same money that you pay the taxes on. The other challenge is that if you bought an item and there was a VAT component on it, which is a tax, and you decided to pay the person by a bank transfer or by electronic means, you will pay tax again on the VAT. I mean, I can't imagine this level of insensitivity. And we are doing this at a time that we say COVID has ruffled our people. When they came here and said the year of rose, they budgeted
between 30 and 40% of Momo transactions are less than 100 Ghana cedis. The data matches with the poor. That is a representation of people who are sending money, who fall within the poverty bracket. They won't pay this tax. They will not pay this tax. It is only above 100 Ghana cedis that you pay this tax, and this tax is only 1.75%. The other tax handle, corporate tax is 25%. There are some other tax, VAT, look at VAT, where it is. Some of them, 7.5%. This is 1.75%. It is affordable. It is convenient to pay. It takes away all the inconvenience that we were facing at these road tolls, etc., etc. And I think that if you balance it out, it's helpful for us. In the midst of crisis, the first thing you have to do is to protect lives and livelihood. If it means providing people with freebies to protect at a time when water was critical for fighting COVID, to give people free water so that they can save their lives, we have no regret about it. If that is...
So that is Kojo Ponkroma. I'll be wrapping up on this conversation. I'm in the studio with Harrison Ahoba, and we've heard them. I don't know your own opinion about this conversation, but I believe that from tomorrow you hear more on Tonton Sang with Kwame Menka, more on Jaso with Ohineba, if it's our network, Tvxyz and Power FM, and subsequently on the Gumbe show in the evening. I'm sure the actors in this particular conversation will be speaking to the issues. But I always want to end this conversation with a question before you come in. I want to just find out. Now, the Information Minister spoke, Isaac Adongo also tried to give us an interpretation of what is taught about. But in all this, there's this suspicion that the middle upper income class are the ones who are going to bear the brunt. They have the purchasing power, and so if the benchmark value is removed and they can go to the market, many of the items affected is about them. Now, Kojo Ponkroma's response says that 30 to 40% of Momo, those into Momo business on daily basis are the ones who deal within 100 cedis or less, and therefore they are not going to be affected, which means those who have the bigger portfolio in terms of revenues are the ones going to suffer. Property rates, the poor man like you and I may not have properties, and so they may not come after us. If they go after the owners of the properties, it may translate into paying more for rent.
That's it. So in effect, nothing has really changed. From what you have said, nothing has really. So you will still continue to pay in excess of 100 plus something for your Momo to compensate for over the 40% who are not paying. So you are still paying more.
Which is the likely 10% of the population who are paying direct tax.
That is it. So again, the property tax rate, like you spoke about, I will be paying more because I own a property. Then you who don't own the property, you aren't going to pay. So nothing has really changed.
Time is up. I just want you to look into the camera and deep from your heart, what you can share with the average Ghanaian, average businessman.
So thank you so much for the opportunity. There's no better time now to squeeze and watch your lifestyle. Things are not going to get any better from what you have seen and heard. So as an individual, like I mentioned, all you just need to do is watch your lifestyle, sacrifice some things that you can do away with so that you can have free money to invest. Irrespective of whatever it is happening now, there is still an opportunity for you to think about your children's education, your own health, your personal pension, and ultimately how you would want to live in the very near future. If you are a business, think of collaborating, think of partnering with people, think of working together so that at least if you are not making an income for profit, you should be able to reduce your costs. So I look forward to seeing you again, and thank you so much, Eric, for the opportunity.
Thank you. He is Harrison Ahogba. He's the Vice President, Sales and Marketing, Invest Corp. And this evening's topic was the budget adjusting to the reality. I believe that you have appreciated some of the hard facts that we have put across you. And as he said in the summary, just brace yourself, be ready to cooperate, and let your family understand that things will not be easy. It's been tough, it will be difficult. As the finance minister said, all of us must brace ourselves for the difficulties in order to help Ghana reposition the economy. And I leave on this note, that if you are a government and you know that government is wasting resources on things that do not matter as far as the collective interest is concerned, speak out. Otherwise, the populace will say no. You cannot rule them by the animal farm analogy, where some people don't care as far as their interest is concerned, and the masses will suffer because they can visit some of these unpopular things on them. That's how I want to end the program today. And of course, we want to say thank you to the Vice President, Sales Marketing, Investcorp, Harrison Ahogba, for being our guest. Joe Jackson is in Elmina as we speak. We tried severally, and his line appears to be cutting. But I believe in the course of our programming this week, Joe Jackson will speak to us. See you again, and thanks for joining us on Ideas Exchange today. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, this program will be repeated. So join us again tomorrow from 1 to 2 p.m. if you missed part of this conversation. Bye for now.